Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. In this week's special episode, we sat down with Rick Fisher, Senior Fellow at the International Assessment and Strategy Center. He touches on China's space ambitions from the moon, Mars to asteroids, and what that means going forward. Let's tune in. Hello, Rick. Thank you so much for joining us today. Great to have you back on the show.
Tiffany, thanks for having me back.
So the U.S.'s second highest ranking general in the military, General Hyten, recently warned that China's weapons development, especially the hypersonic missile test, which China still denies, could lead to a nuclear strike against the United States. So to begin with, how dangerous is this, and what are some actionable steps the U.S. could take to defend against it?
Yes, General Hyten is correct. The new fractional orbital bombardment system combined with a hypersonic glide vehicle allows China to achieve what the United States envisioned in the early 2000s through a set of programs called Prompt Global Strike, in which the United States intended to design hypersonic glide vehicle warheads that would be propelled by missiles globally, but only have non-nuclear warheads, so that essentially the United States could conduct artillery strikes around the world immediately against threatening targets. Now, China, by its demonstration of the orbital bombardment system combined with a hypersonic glide vehicle, is actually achieving this capability. And if armed with a non-nuclear warhead, that creates incentives for China to strike first. And this is much of what is behind the fears of leaders like General Hyten, who sadly has just retired from the American military, and many other leaders around him. Now, you mentioned what can the United States do to defend against this threat? The United States can develop a corresponding capability so as to deter China from using its new capability first. That, unfortunately, does not appear to be part of the Biden administration's agenda for strategic modernization. Now, the Biden administration is investing in new defensive capabilities. And under the Trump administration and the Biden administration, the Pentagon has at various times expressed an interest in either space-based defenses against maneuvering hypersonic glide vehicle like warheads, or what is now being considered are ground-launched, ground-based defenses that would be fast enough to enable them to intercept hypersonic speed maneuvering warheads.
And so since 1964, China has pledged not to be the first party to launch a nuclear attack. But how significant do you think this pledge is? Are they likely to uphold it?
No. China's record of violating pledges and even agreements is fairly long. And if China saw advantage in hitting any other country first with a nuclear weapon, it would do so. But an added danger is added with the advent of the fractional orbital bombardment system and the hypersonic glide vehicle, because that then gives China the option to use a non-nuclear warhead to achieve a strategic or near strategic effect. And so the temptation to strike first with that weapon would be very high.
Recently in the headlines, there was Russia's anti-satellite missile test, which sent around 1,500 pieces of debris floating around in space. And so it's not just Russia that's been developing anti-satellite missiles, but also China. So how dangerous are these? And again, what can we do to kind of defend against them?
The anti-satellite capabilities of Russia and China are, as far as we know, in excess of that of the United States. Both Russia and China have tested their ground-launched anti-satellite weapons against satellites in low Earth orbit and have destroyed them. And as you've mentioned, created large debris fields. The Chinese debris field from 2007 recently threatened the International Space Station. These Russian and Chinese capabilities are very serious. The Chinese have multiple ground-launched anti-satellite systems. The Russians probably have multiple systems as well. They're about to put online a new strategic range surface-to-air missile that they will probably export to China, perhaps even India, that will have a limited anti-satellite capability as well. So these threats, not only are they very serious for the United States, but they're growing. What can the United States do? Well, again, we have to develop our own similar capabilities to deter our adversaries from using theirs, but we can also invest in resilience. If the Chinese knock down some of our navigation satellites, we have to have the ability to replace them almost immediately. Or we can launch capabilities based on cube satellites, which are very lightweight satellites, less than 100 or 50 pounds. And we can put up hundreds of these CubeSats, and many of them could combine to accomplish the mission of a major reconnaissance satellite or a communication satellite. And because the capability is distributed amongst scores or even hundreds of small satellites, they would be very difficult to shoot down.
And so it seems like space is the new frontier where everyone's trying to develop the next systems of tech. Because a recent report found that NASA isn't likely to make its 2025 deadline for its moon landing. And China also has a lot of ambitions regarding the moon, especially they have they're trying to launch their moon-capable space launch vehicles. So if they succeed, what are the broader implications behind that?
There is a new race to the moon. America won the first race in 1969, and then we just let the moon be. We didn't really do anything with that capability or exploit that capability or exploit our ability to put a presence on the moon. The second moon race is for keeps. The Chinese understand, first and foremost, that control of the Earth-Moon system is essential for the Chinese Communist Party to achieve its objectives of political, economic, and even military hegemony on Earth. So China has a very robust moon program. So far, they have sent unmanned probes to the moon. So far, 3 of those, with one returning samples of the moon. That last mission basically exercises all of the functions that would be necessary for putting people on the moon. And China recently announced, or a key Chinese official in the moon program recently stated that it is possible that China could put its people on the moon before 2030. Now, with the announcement a week and a half ago that the United States would have to delay its putting people on the moon from 2024, the Trump administration goal, to perhaps 2025, although an inspector general report from NASA estimates that it may take even longer. This raises the possibility that China could put its people on the moon first. And this is important because it would be a tremendous propaganda and political boost for the Chinese Communist Party, with ramifications in many other spheres. But it would also give the Chinese a leg up in the race to populate the moon. It is possible that between 2030 and 2035, China could produce up to 60 of its Long March 9, which is essentially as large as the American Saturn V that we used to get to the moon 12 times. The Long March 9 could be produced as in batches of 10 per year, meaning that China could produce 60 of these Saturn V size space launch vehicles, moon launch vehicles, by 2035. That would be 60. My estimate is that by simply using 40 of those Long March 9s, China could begin to build 10 bases on the moon. Now, they probably won't do that. They'll use those space launch vehicles for other important projects like going to the Mars or building very large solar power gathering stations between the Earth and the moon. But these are these are the dimensions of the possible race to the moon, the race to exploit the moon. And if China can build a bigger presence on the moon, that means it can exert greater influence on what happens on the moon, who exploits resources and where, who controls the moon eventually.
And so one of the slides we have here shows the early going to the moon architecture from Professor Longley Howe from August 2021. So can you kind of walk us through how this would work?
The United States and the Soviet Union designed unitary space launch vehicles to reach the moon, meaning the moon transport vehicle and the moon landing vehicle were carried by one large space launch vehicle. China has not yet developed its very large space launch vehicle. That may not happen till 2030 or shortly thereafter. So China is accelerating its ability to reach the moon by dividing the moon launch mission into two vehicles instead of just one. And this new space launch vehicle has been revealed to some extent. It may be ready for testing beginning in 2025. And if they are successful with that goal, then it is possible that this new space launch vehicle called the Long March 5 DY may be able to launch a manned space capsule, and then a second one would launch the moon lander, and they would meet in orbit around the moon. The crew would transfer from the transport vehicle to the moon lander, then go down to the moon, accomplish maybe a 3 to 10 day mission, and then launch back into moon orbit, reconnect with the transport vehicle, and then come back to Earth. So this is the architecture that will be used to first carry China's people to the moon. And that space launch vehicle, Long March 5 DY, will be there for many other kinds of missions, especially to transport equipment to build a lunar base on the moon or multiple lunar bases as China designs.
So you brought up earlier how this would not just help in, say, propaganda and other efforts from China, but what are the other benefits of having people on the moon first?
If you are able to populate the moon with the most people first, then you are able to exert greater political influence by including your allies. And China very clearly wants to involve the European Space Agency and Russia in its lunar programs. In the United Nations and just in general politically, you have added leverage to begin to set the rules. And if you occupy certain regions first, then you have the option of transporting dual-use military capabilities to the moon that could prevent other countries, especially the United States, from accessing those same areas. So it's important to occupy a kind of triangular or quadrilateral set of points on the southern part of the moon. That would probably be the first goal of both China and the United States. By doing so, you can always ensure that your Earth control centers have constant contact with your people on the moon. And you're able to control the satellites that you put into moon orbit for communication, surveillance, or even military missions. Furthermore, if you're first on the moon, you are able to uh, put in place capabilities, factories, processing capabilities that allow you to exploit the resources on the moon. There will be a premium in finding early sources of ice water. Uh, Many scientists estimate that most of the ice on the moon is on the southern pole area. So finding reserves of this lunar ice will not only allow you to develop water for survival, but also water can be used to make rocket fuels. And from the moon, it is much less expensive. It's easier to go from the moon to Mars than it is from the Earth to Mars. So getting to the moon early allows for the attainment of many advantages, strategic advantages in terms of exploiting the moon, controlling the politics of the moon, and then expanding your reach to Mars and beyond.
So, speaking of Mars, from a 2002 Moscow conference in June, there's the Going to Mars architecture that uses nuclear thermal and nuclear electric propulsion options. So, to begin with, what is special about this type of technology?
Nuclear propulsion in space has been a long-standing ambition of Russia and the United States, and it looks as if the Russians may be the first to actually put a nuclear propulsion system into low Earth orbit for experimental purposes. China has programs to develop both nuclear electric and nuclear thermal propulsion, while the United States is focusing on the development of nuclear thermal propulsion. Nuclear propulsion allows the transport of payloads to the moon and Mars at far more rapid speeds than are possible with chemical propellants, which we would be using in the 2020s. Nuclear propulsion allows you to possibly cut in half the amount of time that it would take to reach Mars. And that has very positive benefits in terms of limiting the amount of radiation that reaches your crew. Protection from radiation is a big issue in terms of long distance and extraplanetary space travel. So reducing the time that you're spending in space is very healthy for your citizens traveling in space.
And so now the Chinese Academy of Sciences also has a asteroid defense proposal. So what would that look like?
Both the United States and its allies in Europe and China are very interested in developing capabilities for asteroid defense. Of course, we all learn in elementary school that a big asteroid hit the Earth and helped to make the dinosaurs extinct. The big fear is that even an asteroid as large as 150 or even 200 meters in diameter can have the power of hundreds of nuclear bombs. So if we see such an asteroid approaching the Earth, there's an interest in developing capabilities to, at a minimum, divert this asteroid from reaching the Earth. On China's part, though, there are additional interests. China's space program is a dual-use space program, meaning that it's controlled by the military, and it constantly seeks to develop capabilities that can also have military benefits. When China goes to the moon or it goes to Mars, it will be seeking military benefits from that effort. The same with asteroid defense. Now, just this past August, there was a major conference in China. Details of this were posted on the Chinese internet, and some of the papers presented in this conference, which was about asteroid defense, included papers considering the use of nuclear weapons against asteroids and also large lasers. Now, given China's commitment to dual use capabilities, these nuclear weapons and lasers could be used on the moon, Mars, or asteroids that in the future are populated by Chinese astronauts.
So it sounds like, say, in terms of the moon or Mars, there's a competition for each country's own benefits. But in terms of asteroid defense, do you see this as one area countries are willing to work together? But then also, as you mentioned, since China is a dual-use one, if countries agree to work together, would China then take advantage of that and then maybe turn it against them?
Within the space advocate community, which is fairly large, there's great enthusiasm for international cooperation to contribute to asteroid defense. But the Chinese Communist Party very often is not motivated by altruistic ambitions. The Chinese space program has been couched in terms of a contribution to international knowledge, and the Chinese have made commitments to opening up their new space station to international missions and the such, and welcoming international participants in their future unmanned lunar base that could begin building by 2024, 2025. But we also have to remember that the People's Liberation Army is in charge of all these programs. And whether it's the space station or future bases on the moon or Mars or asteroid defense, they will be seeking dual-use benefits. And if they're already contemplating the use of nuclear weapons and very large space-based lasers to defend against asteroids, we have to consider that China is not yet ready to truthfully devote its efforts to peaceful ends, that it may turn around and use these capabilities that it says are for asteroid defense for use against the rest of us.
So what would be some actionable steps, say, the U.S. and allies could take now to kind of stem that risk?
Well, the United States and its European partners are already being very transparent about their asteroid defense ambitions and programs. And this is really the first step. And it challenges China also to be very transparent. When it aired some details about its asteroid defense conference over the summer, that could be viewed as having positive implications. But we need to know much more. China spent the 2000s and the first half of the 2010s concealing most of its ambitions to go to the moon and to go to Mars. That does not bode well. That does not create confidence that China is willing to be as transparent as the United States. But if it becomes that China forces us into an asteroid defense race, then we have to be ready to join it.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for joining us today. Great to have you back on the show.
Thank you, Tiffany.
And for those just tuning in, that was this week's special episode with Rick Fisher, Senior Fellow at the International Assessment and Strategy Center. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.